I have really felt over the last few months that I need to get back on track with my mental and my physical wellness. But it's one thing to wish for elevated wellness, and it's a whole other to implement it into your life. So today I want to talk about the practical ways that I plan to think, feel, and perform my best over the next year. Grab your cup of tea and let's dive into it. So you might call it a cliche, but I love all things related to resets, especially at the start of a new year or a new season. Because the power of a reset, particularly at key milestones, is that you get to tap in to this collective consciousness that is sweeping the globe at the same time. Everyone feels as motivated as you do. So you get to ride that wave and to recreate, reimagine the way that you see this next season of your life going. The idea of temporal landmarks or landmarks related to time was something that was really highlighted to me when I read Dan Pink's book, When. He talks about how, as humans, we navigate through space using landmarks, but we also do the same when it comes to time. So, by navigating your way through life using time, you tap into the psychological significance that is related to particular dates or particular milestones, which is what psychologists would describe as a fresh start effect. There is a before and after when it comes to your motivation. So, a new year or a new season in your life doesn't necessarily hold any inherent power, but it does have a psychological power for you to be able to really reflect on where you have been and where you could potentially go. Which leads me to my first point, and that is to pin your vision first. Now, if you follow this channel, you would know that I have absolutely loved using Pinterest more than ever in my life over the last couple of years. And that is because it creates a visual representation of your goals and your aspirations. For me, it's also a place that I can explore ideas. So even if it is something that I'm not necessarily yet implementing into my life, it's a place where I can start to learn more about that particular idea or explore if it even is something that I want to implement. And this really relates to one of my favorite books that I talk about on this channel, which is Tiago Forte's Building a Second Brain. Now, I have a few different devices that I would consider my second brain, but Pinterest has become the visual place that I build that second brain. So whenever I hear about a particular topic, whether it's related to health or work or something that I am interested in as a hobby, for example, then I will start to explore that idea on Pinterest more, whether it is visually or whether it is through the various information-rich content that they have on there as well. So whatever it is that you are considering adding to your life, think about Pinterest as being the place where you can either explore that vision further or start to bring the picture of that vision to life that you already know that you want and are committed to. Which leads me to my second point, which is to convert your Pinterest into a vision board. Now, vision boarding is something that I've also talked about on this channel a lot lately because I feel like it is something that surprisingly a lot of people do, but don't often actually talk about it. So I have friends ranging from athletes to creatives to people in the corporate world who have vision boards, and they don't often talk about it unless the opportunity comes up. So you could actually find that some of your best friends are creating vision boards and you didn't actually know. So I really want to open up more of the conversation around the power of vision boarding because I feel like particularly in really traditional corporate circles, it's not something that is often discussed. But the best performers understand the power of visualization. Your brain can't easily differentiate between what is real and what is vividly imagined. So detailed visualizations of desired outcomes becomes this form of mental rehearsal, which is why a vision board can work so well because you are getting into that picture. You are triggering your reticular activating system in your brain. This is how your brain filters out all of the noise and tells you what what to focus on. So, by creating a vision board, it tells you where your priorities lie. So every year I feel like I get a little bit better at elevating my vision board to be even closer to where I think it needs to be. And something that I spent more time doing this year was really making sure that I was building complete stories related to particular goals. So instead of just having one picture related to one goal, I would make sure that related to that goal would be several images. Now, the power of having a really detailed visualization is something that I learnt about in neurolinguistics programming, where they highlight that when you are picturing that goal, that aspiration that you have for yourself, to try and imagine it in as much detail as possible. So, what will it look like, feel like, sound like, for example, when you get that thing? So, say for example, if you are hoping to receive a certain payment into your bank account, this is the idea of picturing exactly how that looks in your bank account. You can picture what that looks like in your account that you actually have with the bank that you're with, for example, because you know that that is what it is actually going to look like when you get paid for that particular job, for example. So it makes it as real as possible. So now when I create my vision board, I try and make sure that I am going into that level of detail when it comes to the priorities that I have on there. And I really try and link that back to particular domains of life, as I have talked about in some of my previous episodes on vision boarding. I make sure that I am ticking off not just things related to work, because I feel like a lot of my previous vision boards have been very heavily focused on work and didn't have as much of the balance that I now do have. And so now I spend time putting things on there that are related to food, for example, and health, which hasn't always been such a priority on my vision board. And I'm really specific about what is going on there and why. Now, what I do with my vision board, which I have for a few years now, is that I set it as the desktop backdrop on my laptop. And from speaking to friends and hearing other people talk about this online as well, something that I will actually do this year too is to set it on my phone as one of the wallpapers. Now, I know with your vision board, this can sometimes be something that you want to keep really private and you don't necessarily want other people to see what's on your vision board. But what you can do is use all of the settings. I know that Apple has this on its iPhone. I'm not sure about the other phone, but you can actually customize when certain wallpapers are on your phone at certain times. So, for example, if you know that maybe you work from home and have a little bit more privacy on certain days, maybe that is when you can set your vision board to be on your phone during that time. Or maybe you would prefer for it to be out of hours when you aren't in the office, for example, and you can set it on your phone at that time. While we are on the topic of my phone, just diverting from vision board slightly, but it is related, is I also use the widgets on my phone really strategically as well. So I have them linked to specific boards on my vision board. So for example, there might be boards that focus on mindset, where I can see motivating words and quotes pop up as a part of some of the pages on my phone. Or I might have things that are related to other areas that I want to focus on. Or I even have ones that are related to food. So I can constantly see healthy food and the things that I want to be adding into my life in terms of nutrition constantly on my phone as a reminder of the way that I want to be eating. Which actually leads perfectly into my third point, which is to build your second brain. Now, this is not to be confused with Tiago Forte's idea of a second brain related to your personal knowledge management system. This is related to your second brain being your gut. Now, this is something that I've always heard. I know it's a phrase that we always hear people talk about, their gut instinct, for example. But the significance of this was really brought to my attention when I read Jim Quick's book, Limitless. He really highlighted that if you are expecting your brain to be doing the thinking for you, to be performing for you, then you need to make sure that you are feeding it the right fuel to be able to perform. Now, to simplify this as much as possible, your gut is lined with an enteric nervous system. Now, this is a nervous system that contains hundreds of millions of neurons. I think I read somewhere that it actually contains more neurons than your spinal cord, which is where that gut instinct comes from. It's because of the nervous system that you have connected there that has this mind body connection. So you want to make sure that if your gut is thinking for you, that it is healthy. So for me personally, nutrition is something that I have started to pay more attention to than ever this year. And something that has really caught my attention this year, which I do need to do more research into, but I love the idea of, is feeding all of the different microbiomes that are in your body and really trying to have a diverse plant-based diet as much as possible. Now, this is where many people recommend, as you would have heard, having at least up to 30 different plant-based elements in your diet a week. I've even heard some people say 50, but 30 seems to be what is usually recommended. What I love is that it really simplifies nutrition. So while the 30 points might sound complicated, all it really means is that you are eating really colorfully, for example, which I think is a really fun way to approach your nutrition. So a salad that is full of lots of different elements and is diverse so that you are feeding those different microbiomes. And I have found this a really nice way to not only gamify my nutrition, but also beautify it as well. It's almost been this really nice way to just get even more creative with the way that I am eating and to just really appreciate how beautiful and nourishing all of the God-given food that we already have in the world is. And this actually leads back nicely to my Pinterest boards too, because I mentioned that I do have boards that are related to body. So I have these beautiful boards and these beautiful aesthetics of just how good healthy food can look and can also be so delicious as well. So by tying in my Pinterest mood boarding and my vision board to my actual nutrition, it's become this really nice system where it's not just this fluffy goal, it's actually an actionable system as well. And speaking of action, that leads me to my next point, which is over the last couple of years, I have started to develop a ideal week calendar. So this is a calendar that I create completely separate to my usual work calendars, and I do this on my Apple Calendar program. And in this calendar, it has my ideal days for every day of the week, and it maps this out in a lot of detail. So this includes, for example, every habit that I want to be implementing and the times that I do it. Because what I have talked about on this channel before is the idea of what gets scheduled gets done. And I have found that whenever I have a habit that I want to implement into my life, if I attach it to a particular time of the week or a particular time of the day, it actually does get done. Whenever I have a habit that I would like to have that seems to never actually fully take off, that is always because I haven't scheduled it into my week, or I don't actually know a practical way that it can fit into my life. Now, obviously, sometimes may vary slightly. Like you might think you might do things on the weekend at a certain time, like your various hobbies that you want to have, but life comes up and you want to make time for your family and your friends. So there are things in there that are going to shift, and you don't want to be so rigid that you are living your life by your calendar. But usually there are days where you can have a little bit more of a set routine, or at least some parts of the day where you can be a little bit more set in your routine. So for example, I have found, because I wake up so early in the morning and have been waking up at 4 a.m., this really gives me a really good way to stick to some of the habits that I want to have in my morning routine before a lot of the rest of the world wakes up and my diary can sometimes go in different directions. So the things that I like to focus on during that time, for example, are things like prayer, journaling, yoga, making time to read, to go for walks, and I do all of that in the morning. So what I have loved about putting this into my diary is that This shows me the times that I can make that happen in a really practical way. So it's one thing to want to do all of these things in the morning, but it's another to know when you need to move on to that next thing to be able to tick all of those boxes. What I also do is that I color code all of my diary too, quite specifically. And this links back to the life domains that I have highlighted as a part of my vision boarding and my goal setting process too. So, by actually mapping those life domains out on my calendar and visually, I can see not only how I spend my time, but also maybe where I'm spending too much time in a particular area or too little time in a particular area. So it's really nice to be able to see where my time is going and how it can be used better. What I've also really tried to do this year is to pay more attention to what I am titling each of those events. So they are all reoccurring events that are in my calendar going forward, and I've tried to give them titles that are more motivating and more related back to my goals. So, for example, instead of saying something like morning walk, I might say something that is related to my 10,000 steps goal. Some things in my calendar are really achievable, like there's no reason why I shouldn't be able to do some of them, but some of them are also really aspirational. So, the way that I title it is showing me how those everyday activities are going to compound into that big vision that I have for myself and that goal that I have for myself. And it's showing me how those everyday actions will add up over time. And I've tried to, at least for now, be really specific in my diary about as much detail as possible. So I, for example, have on there the days that I will prepare my lunch and make a healthy meal at home as opposed to other days. And what I have found in relation to the way that I title the events in my calendar and making them really motivating is that this increases the emotional resonance of those things. So I feel a stronger emotional connection to this ideal week that I have for myself, and it makes me more motivated to want to actually take those actions because I understand the why behind all of those habits. The next thing that I do is that I set reminders in my phone. Now, last year I set quite a few reminders, and I found that there were so many that I started to feel a little bit desensitized to them. So you want to make sure that you're being a little bit selective with these reminders. So for me, the reminders in my phone are related to more of those life admin things. So the things that are potentially a little bit boring but very necessary to make sure that I tick off, I have a reminder set for them, and you can set them recurring. So things might pop up every fortnight or every month, for example. If you have certain bills that you need to manually pay, you can set reminders for that too. The next thing that I've done that has really elevated the way that I am thinking, performing, and feeling is creating chains and archives. Now, this idea of a chain is something that I learned about when I heard about Jerry Seinfeld having this technique that he used to create consistency in his writing. And he would have this big calendar where he would take a red marker and cross out a day every time he wrote on that day. And so over time, it built up this chain. And it meant that as the chain got longer, he got more attached to the chain and he didn't want to break the chain. And this is his advice to other people that are aspiring to be comedians as well. And it's something that can apply to so many domains and that a lot of people have found really inspirational. This idea of building this chain that you don't want to break. So I've tried to take the time a little bit more in the work that I do to see things as a chain. So to pay more attention to not necessarily always just the vision and the outcomes, but appreciate the process. So, for example, every time I upload a new episode to my podcast, there is an episode number related to that. It represents a part of this unbroken chain, and that is the achievement in itself. So now when I am uploading my podcast, for example, or creating all the files related to my YouTube channel, I always try and pay attention to the numbers related to those things and really just take a moment to pause and appreciate what that actually represents. And that each of those things is adding to an archive. So, for example, every time I upload a new podcast, that is like this verbal diary that I am archiving over time. Every time I share a new YouTube video, that is adding to my portfolio. It's creating this archive. Every time I file away a project that I've wrapped up with a client, that represents a project completed and something achieved in that too. And I also think of this in different areas outside of work as well. So, for example, I've even started to think about my wardrobe being this archive, particularly as I worked in fashion for over a decade. Your wardrobe, whether you have worked in fashion or not, represents this archive of your life experiences. So, in different aspects of my life, I'm really trying to think a little bit more like an archivist wherever I can and focus not always so much on chasing the outcome, but appreciating this journey that I've been on and how far I've already come. Thanks so much. Subscribe for more like this, and I'll see you in the next episode.